What's up, War Room? Welcome back. Joe and Connor recording this on a Monday night after a nice, healthy 40 minutes of ranting about the head coach and GM search. We're going to answer some of your Discord questions. I'm going to pepper Connor with questions about his film breakdown of Will McDonald and talk a little Olu Fashanu and some other things that are a bit evergreen. We are mildly concerned that we're recording this Monday night and we're going to release it Wednesday morning. And the Jets may have had major news by then. So we're not going to spend we spent the entire pod talking head coach and GM. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking that on this. If the Jets make a hire before Wednesday morning, we'll have an emergency pod. We still want to have use for this lovely video we're going to put together. CR, how you feeling?
Okay. I think, yeah. It's one of those things where there's a lot of game left here where it could go a lot of ways.
It's like halftime.
I don't love that the Titans are bringing Bergonzi back for a second interview.
You don't want to go there, Mike. Come on. You're a Northeast guy.
You don't want to go there. You want to come back to the Northeast. Although everybody from the Northeast just loves Nashville these days. So that's a problem. I think that, there's still hope in this search. There has been very minimal leaks. You haven't even heard
It's almost like they fired all the top leakers in the recent months. What happened?
Yeah, close. There's still a few, but I think that there's the Grigson fear amongst the fan base right now, and I get it. I do. We talked a lot about that, and then the trickle down effect of everybody's playing like musical chairs, the coaching. Oh, Cowboys is open. Is this person going to go here? And is now Glenn going to not go to the Saints? You kind of like the dominoes that just fall. It's good that Vrabel happened fast. It just kill the hope.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Rip the Band-Aid right off. So yeah, I'm good. I like the energy of a coaching search. I'll admit this one feels like it is dragging, even though it's not. It's just because there's so many names that are, kind of fat around the steak. And I know that's really harsh to say, but let's be real. Like, you look at some of these names they talk to and you're like, why? There's got to be a reason, but for us as media members analyzing it, we don't really need to go much further with it.
All right. So I'm going to jump in, pop in the Professor Hallaby glasses on to read some Discord questions here. From WB Cards. Do you think the public perception of Woody would be much different if he did everything the same as he has over the last 15 years, but we won and made the playoffs?
Of course.
Some, like a normal team. Would it possibly go from impatient meddling owner to aggressive money spending supportive owner? I feel like he does a lot of the right things in turn of money and does actually want to win. He gave JD 6 years, Salah 4. He spends a ton of cash, usually just puts it on the wrong guys. Not an unfair question. And yes. The reality is like history is written by the winners. And if you win, perception changes on these things. And like you could say, all right, if the Jets beat the Bills in 2015, in week 17, they made the playoffs and they beat the Bengals wild card round. Cool. All right, now we have another thing to talk about. We just recorded the Long Streets of Fire. Braxton Berrios makes a catch. They make the playoffs in 2022 with Mike White. Maybe they lose a competitive game wild card weekend. We're not talking about the playoff drought anymore. Like, we have a playoff win in recent memory, and it's like, all right, like, yeah, Woody's not great, but like they've tried and they've won, and like he does, they generally spend money. There's sometimes they do budget cuts at the wrong times and in the wrong places, so it's not all perfect. But yeah, look, no one really complained about Woody Johnson all that much from 2000 to 2011. When the Jets were winning a lot, and they were certainly spending a lot. They went all in on that 2011 team, kind of like they just did with this team, and it just didn't work because they should have replaced the head coach and some other parts, a year before. But yeah, look, most NFL owners are not popular and are not very good. But if you win because you get the right quarterback or the right head coach, all of a sudden it's like, he's fine. So I'm not standing up for Woody. I'm not standing up for Woody's meddling. I will say it is a common misperception that the Jets have a very quick hook. They don't. They've been probably too patient with certain GMs and head coaches. That hasn't been one of their fatal flaws, but the whole picture hasn't been great. What do you think happens if, let's say, the Jets make the playoffs in 2015 and 2022? Those are the 2 years they were kind of close.
Yeah, I think the perception significantly changes because there's a big trickle effect here, right? One being that I think Woody makes some of the decisions that he does because the playoff drought understandably really bothers him. And I know something that's bothered him even before this drought went deeper is he really, really has wanted to host a home playoff game. That's like I've said this on the podcast before, and this is, a little nugget I've dropped. It's not shocking. I'm not acting like I'm breaking insane news, but something I've heard directly, that he's mentioned to people around him, various regimes, is that they've wanted to host a home playoff game for a long time. And it's been a really big priority. And that's eluded them. So the thing with Woody is you go down the checklist because you want to be fair. And I think Woody, for the most part, people lean like one way, too far each way. You go down a checklist and you kind of come up with a really simple eval. Does he spend on players? Most of the time, the Jets, when they stink and they have cap space, they go out and get players. I mean, they do. I think that the Jets have been poor with in-house extensions over the last 15 years. And I think part of that also was on the people running the team not getting ahead on extensions, and I've also heard some complaints about cash restraints with Woody. I've heard that before. So I think there's times where he's a big spender and there's times where he tightens back and there's not enough balance consistently year by year. That's been a frustration of front office regimes here. I know of multiple. So that's good and bad from Woody. It's good when he spends a lot, but it's bad that he randomly tightens the belt. And it's like, it rubs people the wrong way. I think the stadium, which has been a collective effort with them and the Giants, and how they go about everything associated with the game day experience is relatively a bottom tier NFL experience, honestly. From the stadium to what fans get for their money, all that stuff, that hasn't been handled well. And by the way, like, he hires the people in charge of all this so that you get graded on that. I know you're not calling the season ticket holders, but you hire all the infrastructure for that. I think that, like you said, Joe, he gives people time. Like, that's one thing you can't kill him on. It really actually bothered me how much of a runway that Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh got. And that didn't bother me that they got the long runway. What bothered me was after they were fired, the full-scale attack put on clearly sources around them or them directly on Woody like, you got to win. Yeah. At some point, you got to win. You can't.
Enough already.
Enough. Like, okay, maybe he said something stupid or he did something that you didn't like, but you had a long time to win games and you didn't win. So you had, if you're Joe Douglas, Sam Darnold, and then your own number 2 overall pick, and then your veteran move that was very expensive. Imagine if you were Woody Johnson. Yeah. You're like, man, I brought you here to build things around Darnold the right way. Failed. Greenlighted the number 2 overall pick. You to make the number 2 overall pick a quarterback. Failed. Gave you a ton of cash to go get Aaron Rodgers. Failed. You're going to be pissed. Like, you're going to start saying some outrageous stuff where you're frustrated. So I'm not defending Woody Johnson, by the way. I think there are a lot of issues with the Jets that start at the top. A bulk of them start at the top. But I do think it's a fair point that he's the constant, right? During the drought, who's the one person that's been here throughout the entire drought in a position of power? It's him. And you are going to take a lot of the blame for that, and rightfully so. So it doesn't mean he's a 0 out of 10.
No, but it's
not good.
It changes everything. It's not good.
Yes.
But it's also, no one wants to hear Saleh and Douglas mope, especially Douglas, when you got 94 games. We're also getting speculation in the Discord. This question came directly from Brick, which is funny.
Maybe
higher up question here that I want to scroll up to from Jay Targ 23. What kind of questions get asked during the GM head coach interviews? Obviously, it's not a normal corporate job interview. So I've always been curious how certain candidates blow ownership away. Specifically, what could Grigson be telling them that cancels out his first stint? I mean, I do think in some ways it is kind of like a corporate interview if you handle it correctly, right? If I would imagine that you have to go in, you have to present a plan. If you're a GM for the entire organization. So this is the coaching staff I want to build. This is the scouting infrastructure I'm going to build. This is how I'm going to handle contracts. This is what I think of the current roster. Here are the first few moves I'm going to make. If you're the Jets, this is what I'm thinking about Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to sit him down, have a conversation. We're going to do this, this, and this. So I would imagine, especially if you interview so many damn people, and some of them are probably quick, silly courtesy interviews, that if you come in prepared and you're experienced, you could look really good by comparison to, even though they weren't interviewing for the same job. If you're Rex Ryan and you come in and say, well, we're just going to do it because we're tough and we're Jets and that's the Jets way. And yeah, they're going to play for me and I'm going to kick Mike Vrabel's ass twice a year. They're like, okay, how? What's your plan for our analytics department? And what's your plan for in-game management? And what kind of offense do you want to run? And you're like, well, we'll figure that out. We're just going to use, a bunch of grit. And it's like, well, okay. And then someone else comes in for a GM interview and they're like, look, like, I'm going to hire this person, this person, this person. I can tell you this coaching staff is going to come here. I can get them. They're going to come on roughly these terms. This is the staff they're going to build. This is the kind of style I want to play. I think you come in with that level of preparation. I would imagine, since he's an experienced GM, Grigson probably did. I could see someone very smart like Hallaby or Greenberg coming in with that level of preparation. Borgonzi, who's been in waiting to be a GM and has been in one of the best organizations in the league, I'm sure came in very prepared. Spielman, probably another good example, although, again, he has not directly been a GM, but he could say, look, here's what I learned from Agnew and Dorsey, and here's how I had them build things, that whole deal. So, I think if you're smart, and again, my guess is the range of, I don't know how the Jets are exactly handling these interviews. We know it's Woody, Chris, Jaime, Spielman, Tannenbaum. I'm sure they're asking a wide range of questions. My hope would be that they are very, and this is probably not the honest to God case, unfortunately, but they are very targeted into like, how do we win in today's NFL? How do we win in the AFC? Right? The final four teams in the AFC have been the same back-to-back years, right? It's been the Bills, the Ravens, the Texans, and the Chiefs. How are we going to beat Josh Allen and the Bills? How are we going to win the AFC East and host a playoff game? What kind of team are you going to build that's going to do that? What have you learned from how the Ravens built their roster? What have you learned from how the Eagles have been consistently successful? What did you learn from how the Texans and Commanders turned it around? I don't know, that kind of stuff. But, you could see to the first part of the question, how a guy who's done it for a long time, like a Grigson, pitching to a Woody and a Chris and a Jaime, could win the room by being prepared and having a plan. Now, I just don't think he's the only GM who did that. But what do you think on this, how this process plays out?
Of course, it goes candidate by candidate, right?
Yeah.
Like if you talk to, and they've talked to a lot of different people, say Jim Nagy, who runs the Senior Bowl, hey, how is your scouting department set up? What are your processes? What have you learned working with agents of player representation? More unique things, putting on an event, working with a budget. And then, Louis Riddick, somebody who's been in media now for a long time. Hey, what infrastructures have caught your eye as a system of sustainable success? What teams? What people in the league do? What would you try to emulate? And then you talk to people that are like a Borgonzi or Hallaby. You sit there and go, what are you in charge of? What processes have you put in place? How many people do you manage? How you could even show, hey, here's how what's crazy is like the verbiage in different buildings could be different. How you write up a player can be different. The grading system can be different. With Hallaby specifically, have you built out an analytical grading system, and how does it differentiate from a tape grading system? Is a tape grading system, subjective to the eyes? Is an analytical system something that there is no arguments against? Like